Okay, so this is the Bible study from Matthew chapter 8, verses 28 through 34. And we've also got a couple texts in a couple other Gospels listed here, Mark 5, 1 through 20, and Luke 8, 26 through 39. Um, those are basically the same story in the other Gospels, and a lot of times I'll use this book, The Harmony of the Gospels, to just kind of see the Gospels side by side and be able to tell, what texts are correlated. Um, we're going to talk about this a little bit in the text. Sometimes uh, different people have different thoughts on what texts correlate, and so this is, for lack of a better term, this is not gospel. It is the Gospels, but it's how it aligns things is not necessarily gospel in and of itself. So some of those things are right, and some of them maybe just guesses. It is helpful in our study, though, and it is helpful to read other texts. We'll talk about during the study a little bit, some of the reasons why maybe there's disagreement on that, and kind of where I stand, where I think a lot of us stand. Uh, so the text says, when he arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, two demon possessed men came from the tombs to meet him. Or when he arrived at the other side in the region of Gadarenes, two demon possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. What do you want with us, Son of God? They shouted. Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time? Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, if you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs. He said to them, go. So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into town, and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon possessed men. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. Now, you may or may not want to read, if you're teaching this Bible study, to read all of this at the beginning. It's really the same story, but actually the Matthew text is the shortest of the stories, so there's more information found in the other two texts. So Mark chapter 5, 1 through 20 says, then they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. That's information that's not in the other text. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from the distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. And he shouted at the top of his voice, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me. For Jesus had said to him, come out of this man, you impure spirit. Then Jesus asked, what is your name? My name is Legion, he replied, for we are many. And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. So we know then that Jesus is talking to the impure spirits and not to the man, but the man is the one speaking. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them. He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. That's information that we didn't have in the other text. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. So that last paragraph there is information we didn't have before in the other text. Luke 8:26 through 39 says, "They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, 'What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me.' For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' 'Legion,' he replied, because many demons had gone into him, and they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Jesus, who had seen it, those who had seen it told people how the demon possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone begged him to go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. All right. So remember that you can download a PDF copy of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us as we study these texts. We are going to sort of primarily be in the Matthew 8 text, which is the simplest telling, but we are also going to sort of invite the information from the other Gospels into our story and not ignore it, so that it brings context to what we're studying. Number one says, what did we talk about in our last study in the book of Matthew? And in Matthew 8, just before this text, we see that Jesus calmed the storm. He was sleeping in the bottom of the boat while the disciples were panicked and afraid, and he wakes up and says, "Oh, you of little faith," and then says, "Peace, be still," and the storm is quieted. And then they said, "What sort of man is this that even the wind and the waves obey him?" So that's what we talked about last time. Number two, where are they now according to 8:28? So they have reached the other side of the lake. So they were in the storm on the lake, and now they're arriving at the other side of the lake in a place called the Gerasenes. Um, or the Gadarenes, depending on which text we're looking at. And the footnote in Matthew in my Bible says some manuscripts Gergesenes and some Gerasenes. So remember that we didn't have the printing press when the Bible was first written, and we didn't have Word documents, and weren't able to use the same document and print 1,000 copies. People copied them over, and when they copied them over, it was reliant on what they read and saw, and um, of course, it's not quite as bad as the old telephone game where somebody whispers in your ear and then you have to tell the next person, and there's so much interpretation that happens or failure to hear. It's not quite that bad because people who were copying it were looking right at an existing copy. But if they looked at it and they at a glance thought it said something other than what it thought it said, with similar letters. That was very possible. It's also possible there were different names for some of the regions. And even over time, the names for some of the regions changed. So that's a reasonable enough explanation of the difference there between the manuscripts. And, Mark and Luke are a little more consistent. And so I think we can probably assume that that's the name of the place. Number three says, what do we find there? Or what did they find there? It depends on who you ask. So Um, B says two demon possessed men. We're studying Matthew, and I won't hear of anything else. C, a man with an evil spirit. So let me just lay this out. The stories appear to most people to be the same story, with this one detail having been changed, and that is that Matthew says there were two men, and Mark and Luke say there was one man who was possessed by many evil spirits named Legion. Um, and you say, well, how do we reconcile this? Well, the way I reconcile it is that we have three different writers who received information. So Matthew was one of the disciples. Mark and Luke were not one of the original 12 disciples, although they did get the stories from they were included because of apostolic authority. So it's believed they were companions of apostles who knew the story and told them. So Mark probably was Peter. We know that Luke traveled with the Apostle Paul, but also was a doctor and did extensive research and talked to people. And so I say all that to say we I say there was three different stories from three different people's perspectives and three different people's memories. And one person's memory could have been off. And the truth is, the truth or the point of the text does not change when there's one person versus two people. Either way, the purpose of the text being included is the same. I will say, um, so we, as the Church of the Nazarene, we believe about the scriptures that they inerrantly reveal everything necessary for our salvation, which is significantly different from the traditional view of scripture being inerrant, which means there are no mistakes. So if some of the more fundamentalist denominations believe there are no mistakes, then they have to believe that there was in Matthew's story there was one person, in Mark and or two people, and in Mark and Luke's story there was one person. Therefore, this must be two entirely separate instances. So I've heard that argument from particularly fundamentalist Baptists that these should not be. That's why I said this is not gospel in and of itself. The gospels are in here, but the interpretations is not gospel in and of itself. So people say this is not, these are not the same story. They can't be, because there was one person in two of the stories and two people in one of the stories. And the gospel, the word of God is inerrant. So there's a difference between inerrancy and the Nazarene belief that it inerrantly reveals everything necessary for salvation, because the truth is that whether there was one or two people does not change the point of the story, and therefore it still reveals everything necessary for salvation. And that's a really important distinction. And so in the Church of the Nazarene, it is not hard for us to dismiss that the difference between the number of people and say, let's three people's memories, three people's um, points of view, like asking three people what happened in a car crash and they were all standing in different places. Some of them heard things the other one didn't. And I don't have a problem saying that and still believing that the Bible is authoritative. But some people feel like that's a slippery slope. And if you allow for uh, things to be different like that, and anything to be possibly not entirely accurate, then you have called into question the truth of the whole Bible, and therefore we need to stand on inerrancy, and therefore these must be two different stories. I don't feel that way. I don't feel like they must be. I feel like there's enough in common between them that it's likely they're the same story. And that's obviously what the authors of this book also felt when they put them side by side. So I'll just say that. D, I'm not sure these are the same story. Can we get rid of those who are those other confusing references? So that's if you're really bothered by the differences and you really kind of stand on the inerrancy and you want me to just cross out the other references and not try to pretend they're the same story, whatever. Well, however many people there were, they came from the tombs, which is probably not a good sign. And so this E is kind of where I stand, that let's get on to the point of the text. Let's not worry about the details that don't make a difference in the point of the text. So a lot of this has to do with understanding that the Bible is not intended to be a historical, it's not a history book, it's not a science textbook. It is a book of theology, which means it is a book about God's interactions with his people, words about God. Um, and so if the stories of God's interactions with his people have inconsistent details but a consistent point, then that's what the Bible was put together for anyway, the point. And so let's find the consistent point between the stories, and we can believe that God got these stories to us for a purpose to express that consistent point. Number four, what do we learn about this man or these men? A, they were so violent, no one could pass that way. Yes. B, no one could bind this man anymore, and that's in the other ones. It's like they've tried. So I feel like we've gone away from sort of a thinking that legitimizes demons in modern culture, even in the church. So many times we say, well, that person is schizophrenic, or that person is on drugs, or that person is whatever, mental health problems. Um, and I don't, whether you want to, I don't think those two are different, and I don't think those two are separate. And I think um, to talk about those things as purely medical, or purely because of drugs and alcohol misses the spiritual component. Um, to say that to sort of separate them in a way that says that demons are demons and drug addiction's drug addiction, I think also misses something. Can we say that the enemy is involved if we're unable to think clearly because of mental health challenges, differences in chemical balance in our brain, or whatever it is, or trauma that has shaped our brain's development? Can we say that this is not of God and therefore has been brought upon by the enemy? And the enemy uses his sort of servants, the demons, to accomplish his will. And and so I don't have a problem saying these are the same thing. And therefore, when I imagine this man who can't be bound, and I think about some of the meth heads that we have coming into our church, or some people with some serious schizophrenia issues that cause them to be sort of unstable in their interactions with people, and then honestly, sometimes self medicate with drugs. So sometimes it's both and. When I think about some of the folks that we deal with out on the street and in our homeless ministry, I think this guy is the guy that we deal with. This is the people that we deal with on a weekly basis in our church. And the good news is that Jesus has authority over those demons. The bad news is we don't often seem to have much success administering to these folks. And maybe it's because we're trying to get them into rehab or into mental health counseling instead of bringing the presence of Jesus into the place. I don't know. But I do feel like that Jesus has authority. And I want to do a better job of being inhabited by Jesus to the point, and by the Spirit of God to the point that the Spirit in me also has authority in their lives to drive them out, to drive out those demons. I want that. I don't want to be on TV making a big deal about casting out demons. I don't care that I would be that sort of person. I don't want that attention that would probably bring if I could do that. But I want deliverance for the people that are in bondage. That when I hear this story, I'm reminded of person after person that we encounter every week that is going through this. So I'll just say that. Um, no one could bind them anymore. And I know people like this that are just out of control. And so I want to be able to come in contact with them the way Jesus does. Number five, what happens when the men see Jesus or the man? A, according to Mark and Luke, he fell to his knees and or at the feet of Jesus. Yes. B, he or they screamed, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" And that, yes, that's happened in all three stories. See, he, they ask, have you, this is not a modern he, they, like whatever our culture says today. This is reminding us that, first of all, there was one or two men, and also that there was multiple demons who are actually the ones speaking. He, they ask, have you come here? By the way, they refers to multiple people. That's how English works. Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time? In other words, it's not the end when the demons will be cast down, and so they said, "Whoa, you're early. Have you come to torture us?" And that's why they begged to be allowed to remain, which I mean, we can have a whole other discussion about why Jesus allowed them to remain. But the impact that these demons had on the pigs, um, I mean, maybe tells us something about the strength of humanity and our character. because the pigs couldn't handle what they were experiencing. The man couldn't handle it and was bound and whatever, but at least he seemed to be speaking to Jesus and responding to the presence of Jesus. The pigs didn't know what to do but run in and basically kill themselves. And so um, Jesus does not cast them into the pit of hell in this moment, but rather recognizes that it also still isn't the appointed time, just like they were saying, and sends them somewhere else, sends them into some other place that they can inhabit. Of course, I don't know what happened to those demons when the pigs ran into the water and died. It feels like their own, it seems like poetic justice to me. That their impact on the pigs probably caused their own demise. But anyway, number six, what happened next? Well, perhaps there was some discussion and some negotiation. B, Jesus drove out the demons. Doesn't sound like a lot of, well, there was some. The discussion and negotiation was don't send us into the abyss, send us into those pigs. Jesus did. There was a herd of pigs nearby, and the demons begged Jesus to send them into the pigs. Jesus did that, and then the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. That didn't seem to go as planned. I don't think the demons had that in mind. If they're going to attack and destroy, then I think that's what they get. Um, Number seven, what happened next in Matthew 8:34? It says, then the whole town went to go out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded for him to leave their region. Mark and Luke record their reaction to the demon possessed man sitting there dressed and in his right mind. You think their request for Jesus to leave was about this or something else? I think about this text and I think about, what happened when I think it was Paul and Barnabas were being followed by this servant girl that apparently could give fortunes and was basically telling everybody these are men of God. This is, Jesus is here, and pointing at Paul, and and Paul got so irritated that he cast the demon out, and then the men were mad. The owners were mad because they had lost their financial well being, their source of income. They were profiting on the demon possessing and destroying and attacking this young girl. And then Paul, drove out the demon and they were mad. So I thought about this. I mean, um, there's pigs there. And so the question is, was there somebody mad that their profit center had been destroyed? Maybe, probably. But so I don't know if it was because of that or if it was because of the power of God that was scary. Demons are scary enough in general, but the way this town had handled it is just put this guy out and let him go do his thing over all by himself. Demons are scary, but then when you come in contact with something more powerful than the demons, that in and of itself can be scary, particularly if you're not sure if it's friend or foe. And I don't think everybody was in agreement that Jesus was from God, and I don't think honestly that everybody that was around would have been comfortable even if it was God, because not everybody, this is what happens today, not everybody is in right relationship with God. So some people are really excited when the power of God is around, when God shows up, and some people are scared because an all powerful being like God, there is none like God, but as God is, let's say it that way, is scary if we're not sure that we're on his side. And I thought about saying that he's on our side, And that's how we would probably mostly think about it. Is he on our side? But the truth is, we get to choose. And most of the time, we might be aware that we're not really on his side. And that's actually the problem. That's the thing that makes it most scary. So their response was to ask him to leave. Then we don't have to deal with it. Then we don't have to worry about if he's on our side or not. He's just gone. We can send the demons away. We can send these guys that are crazy away. That's kind of the way Albuquerque deals with the problem. Clean up the neighborhood, send all the people we don't want to talk about, don't want to think about, don't want to deal with to another neighborhood, send them somewhere else. That's why they're multiplying and pushing up into the places that the city and people would not want them to be, because we haven't actually fixed the problem. We haven't cast out the demons. We haven't addressed the source of the issue. And when we do, by the way, as a city, I can't speak for everybody, but speaking for Albuquerque, when we do address it, we try to keep God out of it. The only one who actually has power over these demons, the only one that can actually bring deliverance, the only one that can actually fix the problem, we're like, we don't want him involved. And literally, that's what people say. And it's anyway, I don't want to get political, but it's a group of people that don't believe in God, that don't think he's real, that don't want him around them because they've got stuff going on in their lives that they don't want addressed. And they want to be compassionate. They want to show compassion to people who obviously need help, but they want to do it without God, and it's never going to work. It's going to have the same um, result that we currently have. Um, so, number seven, or no, number eight, how do we react to the power of Jesus? And I just gave some examples. I just talked about some ways. But do we recognize our need for the power of God, or do we send him away too? What if we can't control it and it does things we don't like? See, that's the question. That's the reason we react funny to the power of God, to the power of Jesus, is because we can't control it. And it does what the power of God does, what God wants to do, not what we want him to do. And we don't like that because God might actually, if the power of God shows up, if his presence shows up, it might try to do things in us. And we may not want that. Number nine, according to Mark and the Mark and Luke text, what happened when the man wanted to go into the boat with Jesus? So this is amazing to me. He's like, Jesus, you saved my life. You did everything. I'm ready to go with you. So here he is, a disciple ready to follow Jesus. And Jesus basically says, I don't need more followers right now. Uh, I need you to go proclaim what I've done for you to everybody you know. I need you to be a proclaimer. So I see the importance of discipleship and spiritual growth in our lives, and it shouldn't have to be either or. But honestly, when we look at this, we see how Jesus saw the importance of the proclamation of hope that Jesus brings. He says, I don't need you to come, follow me around for a few years and learn all this stuff. What I need you to do is go to your own town, people that recognize you, people that know what you've been through and know who you were, and I need you to proclaim what Jesus did for you and who you are now. And honestly, the power of testimony, the power of witness, is more powerful than any theology degree. And so when we think about this, the best evangelists in our church are often our brand new believers, not our longtime Christians who've been in Bible study the longest, or that have been to seminary, or have been to the most biblical education. Our best evangelists are the ones uh, who remember the best what Jesus did in their lives, and are willing and able to proclaim it. Number 10, what is God's plan for us when we have been saved and delivered? I'm not going to say don't study the Bible. In fact, I'm going to say get into Bible study. Do all those things. Come to church. I'm going to say all those things. Be discipled, but be a proclaimer. You can do both and. You don't have to choose whether to get into Bible study and learn about God or to proclaim what God has done amongst your hometown and your friends. And honestly, I think sometimes staying in the community where you live, now we can, I got my Master of Divinity online through a college, and I was able to do all that in preparation for ministry without leaving my community where God had called me to do ministry. And so I would say that nowadays with technology and everything we have, we don't have to choose either or. But I can tell you that if we do one without the other, we are going to be missing something. And let's look at what Jesus told this man was very important to him, and let's consider that as we consider what we would do, because that's the part that's crucial. That's the part that's essential, to proclaim what Jesus has done for me. You don't have to be you don't have to have a theological degree to proclaim what Jesus has done for you. Every Christian, everyone who has been delivered from sin should be proclaiming what Jesus has done for you.